Today, we're going to be comparing the cameras on the Realme 11 Pro Plus versus the iPhone 14 Pro. Now, comparing these two is obviously unfair in terms of just the camera quality, but given the fact that the Realme is a really budget-friendly phone, while compared to the iPhone 14's price, it does a pretty decent job during the daytime. For the camera experience, you are getting a decent amount of modes you can use. And when you're taking pictures, you can go from ultra-wide, wide, 2x, and 4x, which is pretty close or almost the same experience as the iPhone, where you do get the ultra-wide, wide, 2x, and 3x. Max zoom for the Realme is 20x versus the 15x on the iPhone. It's nice to get a little bit more reach than the iPhone, but either way, both of the max zoom quality doesn't look that great. For the colors, the Realme does show a bit more washed out look. It's not as vibrant as the iPhone. And when you get to the 4X, the vibrancy comes back. I feel like it's a little bit too much, but that is a big jump in terms of colors. In terms of HDR in the regular photo mode, I feel like it's not that consistent. Sometimes it's a bit too dark, sometimes the highlights are just too bright. So hopefully they can fix this in a future firmware update. The Realme does have a 200 megapixel mode where you can zoom in or crop into your pictures without degrading your photos, especially if you want to print it out. And as you can see, the highlights are struggling a lot, and I'm not doing anything special here. I'm just taking the phone out and pressing the shutter button. I'm not tapping to focus or even adjusting the aperture. What I'm simply doing is just point and shoot. And on the iPhone, it's at the 48 megapixels with the ProRes on. I did notice on the Realme that you can pick the 50 megapixel if you wanted, so it's nice to have an option of between 200 megapixels and 50 megapixels. On the Realme, they do have street mode, which I do like just because I'd like to see the focal lengths and not like 1x, 2x, or 3x. I'm not sure if there's any huge differences between the regular mode and street mode, but using street mode just gives me that photography mentality just because of I'm seeing the focal length numbers. And also, the street mode is the default mode whenever you double press on the power button to quickly bring up the photo app. And in this mode, there is this AI zoom button where you can press anywhere on the screen and it's going to zoom in for you. I'm going to assume that's trying to zoom in into the best framing as possible, and it's pretty quick too, but the only thing is you do lose the access to the focal lengths. And moving on to indoors / low light areas, because of the Realme's less saturated look, the pictures can come out a bit more natural than the iPhones just because of tungsten colors, where it does get super orangey or yellow, but it also affects the other things from the pictures like the red seats where it doesn't pop as much as the iPhone. When you're taking close-up pictures, you do get this nice background blur, which is pretty common on a lot of cell phones or any camera in general. But since the colors on the iPhone is more saturated, taking pictures of food does make it pop more or make it look more delicious. Using the ultra-wide angle on the Realme in darker areas does seem to be like a huge struggle, but once you switch to the main lens, which is obviously the one you should use, is a big improvement. And looking at the 4X and 20X, they do pretty well against the iPhone, so just seeing how all these lenses compare to each other, ultra-wide is something to avoid during low light. And then going outside during nighttime, the ultra-wide is clearly going to be more noisier, you can tell by looking at the sky, and then when you switch to the wide lens, you can tell that there is a massive improvement. Again, with the 4X and max zoom compared to the iPhone is not super far away unlike the ultra-wide, so I would say it's still usable. Now for video, when you shoot 4K on a Realme, the stabilization isn't as smooth as the iPhones, but it's nice to have some stabilization. If you really need the better stabilization, you have to go down to 1080p, so this phone is more of a 1080p shooter than 4K. If you want to shoot video on the ultra-wide lens, the max resolution you can shoot in is 1080p. You can still see the stabilization, but there are times when it looks too jelly, whether I'm panning or maybe I'm just taking a harder step. And also the ultra wide is not as wide as the iPhones. Now this is just another clip of shooting in 4K on a Realme, just to let you see how it looks like during daytime. Also, I did notice that if you shot in 4K and then when you switch to ultra wide to shoot in 1080p, going back to the wide camera, the resolution stays at 1080p, so if you want to shoot in 4K, you would have to manually switch it. And here I'm just showing you both phones in 1080p. Stabilization is still good on both, but I would say the iPhone is just a bit smoother. And when you're shooting close up to something, you still get that nice background blur. When you're in portrait mode, Realme gives you 2 focal lengths. You get 1x and 2x, whereas on an iPhone, you get 1x, 2x, and 3x. For colors, I would say it's not that consistent. Sometimes my olive green shirt looks too purple or just too gray, whereas on iPhone, it's consistently the same color. So the color shift is pretty different in terms of shooting on the 1x portrait mode versus the 2x portrait mode. And in my opinion, I think the 1x looks the best over the 2x, so maybe just stick with the 1x whenever you're taking portrait mode pictures. So that is the comparison between the Realme 11 Pro Plus versus the iPhone 14 Pro. Again, this is not supposed to be a head-to-head comparison, it's more to let you guys see how much value you're getting out of this budget camera. So let me know your thoughts on the Realme 11 Pro Plus's camera. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.